Part 1. The Breach in History. Every time you sign a contract, stamp a document, or check your phone, you are using it. It is an invisible fault line running through human history, the great divide between before and after. It is the most massive coordinate of time ever constructed by humanity. The entire global economy, all legal archives, and the very rhythm of our civilization depend on this single anchor. But there is a glaring problem, a massive breach right at the center of our timeline. If this is the most important date in history, why is the data so fragmented? We are diving deep into the archives to answer one question: who actually drew this line, and why? Our investigation starts with a shocking anomaly that almost everyone ignores. Year zero does not exist. On the historical timeline, you move from 1 BC directly to a D1. There is no zero. If you grew up inside this system, it feels normal. But to a forensic historian, it is a massive red flag. It is the ultimate proof that this timeline was not a natural law. It was engineered by humans, complete with human counting errors. And when we try to pinpoint the exact moment of the inciting event, the birth of Jesus, we walk straight into a chronological war. The Gospel of Matthew claims the birth happened under King Herod the Great, but the historical ledger shows Herod died in 4 BCE. Then you open the Gospel of Luke. Luke ties the birth to a massive regional census conducted by Quirinius. The problem? Roman imperial records firmly place that census in 6 to 7 CE. Between these two anchors lies a 10-year abyss, a decade-long gap in the most famous story ever told. Scholars argue endlessly over this. Was it a translation error? A deliberate theological framing? For an investigator dealing in hard facts, the conclusion is stark. The exact year of birth remains a disputed anomaly. We cannot place a clean pin on the timeline. The investigation has just begun. Part 2. Death in Jerusalem. If the beginning of the timeline is blurred, what about the end? We move our focus to the dating of the crucifixion in Jerusalem. And here, the forensic evidence becomes much sharper, and the historical anchors feel significantly more stable. We have Pontius Pilate. This is a highly verifiable administrative footprint. Roman records confirm without a doubt that Pilate governed the province of Judea strictly between 26 and 36 CE. This gives us a rigid 10-year operational window. The death itself is usually calculated by scholars within a very narrow band, typically around 30 to 33 CE. They cross-reference ancient lunar calendars, Passover dates, and astronomical data to tighten the net. But an investigator must remain skeptical. We are not looking at a notarized Roman execution warrant pulled from a dusty filing cabinet. We are correlating religious texts written decades later with complex mathematical calculations. To build a solid case, we need external evidence. We need witnesses from outside the movement, and we find them. The Roman historian Tacitus, a man with no love for new religions, writes a dry, factual report in his annals. He explicitly states that Christus suffered the extreme penalty under the reign of Emperor Tiberius, sentenced directly by Pontius Pilate. Tacitus even links this to Emperor Nero's brutal crackdown in Rome. Next, we pulled the records of the Jewish historian Josephus, who casually mentions James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. These are independent third-party signals. But the deeper we dig, the more complicated the evidence becomes. We hit the Testimonium Flavianum, a highly controversial paragraph in Josephus's work that sounds suspiciously favorable to Christian theology. Forensic textual analysts argue fiercely over it. Many conclude the text was tampered with, a genuine historical core that was later overwritten and exaggerated by medieval scribes. This is the reality of historical investigation. Every document is a battleground of motives, edits, and transmission errors. Part 3. The Monks Who Built Time. We leave the battleground of the 1st century and jump forward in time to the 6th century. If the exact dates of the events are so contested, who finally standardized this timeline? The trail does not lead to a sweeping imperial decree in Rome or a temple in Jerusalem. It leads to a quiet scriptorium and to a monk named Dionysius Exiguus. The year is 525. Dionysius isn't trying to rewrite world history. He is trying to solve a massive administrative crisis. Time had become a systemic problem for the Christian world. The dates for Easter had to be perfectly synchronized across vast empires. If the calculations failed, the entire network of feasts, fasts, and social rhythms would collapse into chaos. Dionysius creates a new mathematical table and, almost as a byproduct, invents a new baseline, Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. He doesn't do it for glory. He does it to patch a bug in the system. But inventing a standard is only half the battle. A standard only works if the world adopts it. 200 years later, an English historian and monk named Bede the Venerable begins using the AD system in his massive historical chronicles. His works become bestsellers of the medieval world. That is how a new era truly takes over, not by divine perfection, but by mass replication. A system doesn't have to be flawless. It just needs to be copied, cited, and trusted by enough people until it becomes the default reality. We close the first phase of this investigation with one hard truth and one lingering mystery. The truth, the boundary of before and after, is not just theology. It is an incredibly resilient piece of global infrastructure built centuries after the fact. The mystery: how did a timeline drafted in a monk's cell manage to conquer the entire planet, bending kings, courts, and modern computers to its will? To answer that, we have to follow the trail of power into the darkest mechanisms of the calendar itself.